Here is part 1 written in simple English, natural tone, and human-centric storytelling. Approximately 1,500 words. She stood near the long table in the school hallway, quietly waiting for her turn. The talent show sign-up sheets were spread out in front of a few student volunteers, all chatting loudly and laughing with each other. It seemed like every student who walked by had something to say, some joke to crack, or some confident plan about what they would perform. But she wasn't like them. She didn't come with a group of friends or a loud voice. She just came with one simple request. She only wanted to play the piano. When the person before her finished signing, she stepped forward. Her voice was soft when she spoke, almost too soft for the noisy hallway. "I want to perform a piano piece, if that's okay," she said, holding her hands together nervously. One of the volunteers looked up, confused for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Oh sure, just write your name and what you're doing." But before she could start writing, a small group of students who had been standing nearby overheard her. They began whispering to each other in that way people do when they want someone to hear them. "Piano? Seriously?" one of them said. "Does she even know how to play?" Another added, "She probably practices on one of those old dusty pianos from the 80s. A third one laughed. Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. Her hand froze above the paper. She didn't look at them, but she felt every word as if it had weight, heavy weight that pressed into her chest. She tried to ignore it, tried to keep her eyes on the form in front of her. All she had to do was write her name. That was it. Just write her name and walk away. But even that tiny step suddenly felt difficult. One of the girls in the group leaned a little closer and whispered loudly, "Watch her play something slow and boring. Everyone's gonna fall asleep." Another replied, "If she even makes it through the performance without running off the stage." A few of them giggled. She lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear, but the words stuck to her like glue. The volunteer at the table cleared his throat to bring her attention back. "You can go ahead and write it," he said, a bit awkwardly, maybe realizing she had heard everything. She nodded and wrote down her name with small, careful handwriting. Then she hesitated before writing the title of her piece. Her fingers trembled slightly as she finally wrote the words. She had practiced saying to herself for days, "A song for my mother." When she finished, she stepped away from the table and walked down the hallway, head lowered. She didn't want anyone to look at her face right now. She didn't want them to see how much those small jokes had affected her, and she especially didn't want them to think she was weak. But she couldn't deny the sting inside her chest or the familiar ache it brought back. As she walked, she heard one last comment from behind her. Why would anyone play a piano song for a school talent show? It's not a funeral. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to block out the words. She had expected some reaction, but she didn't expect it to hurt this much. She never understood why quiet students like her became easy targets. She wasn't hurting anyone. She wasn't trying to show off. She only wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered to her more than anyone knew. When she stepped outside into the courtyard, she felt a small bit of relief from the fresh air. She found an empty bench and sat down, taking slow breaths. She let her fingers move across her lap, pretending they were moving across piano keys. She often did this when she felt anxious. It was the only thing that grounded her. She had practiced that piece for months, even though she hadn't told anyone. It wasn't a random song she found online or a famous piece everyone recognized. It was a song her mother used to play, a melody that always made their small house feel warm and safe. Her mother had taught her how to play it when she was younger, and it was the very last piece they played together before life took an unexpected turn. That was why she wanted to perform it, because it made her feel close to her mother again, because it reminded her of a time when things felt steady and full of hope. But she didn't expect anyone else to understand that. She didn't expect applause or praise or attention. All she wanted was a small moment on stage, a moment to play her mother's song out loud and let her memory fill the room. But now, after what she had just heard, she wondered if she made a mistake. She wondered if maybe she shouldn't perform after all. While she sat there thinking, she watched other students walking past, laughing, chatting, full of confidence and excitement. They didn't seem to carry the same heaviness she did. They didn't seem afraid of being judged or mocked. They belonged to the world of bright voices and loud steps, the world she always felt a bit outside of. She sighed softly. Maybe she was different. But did being different mean she didn't deserve to perform? Did it mean her music didn't matter? She reached into her bag and took out a small folded paper, the same paper she carried everywhere. It was old and soft around the edges from how many times she had opened it. On it, her mother had written a message years ago. The handwriting was neat and warm. Whatever you do, don't be afraid to share your gift. The world may not always listen, but play anyway. She read the sentence slowly, letting the meaning sink into her heart. Her mother always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself, even on the days she felt invisible, even on the days when she felt like people didn't see anything special in her. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her mother's gentle voice, her patient smile, and the way she always placed her hand over hers when teaching her a new chord. She remembered the warmth of their small living room, the soft glow of the lamp, the wooden sound of the piano keys. Those moments were hers. They were real, and no rude comment or careless laugh could erase that dot. But emotions weren't easy to control. She felt torn between wanting to be brave and wanting to run away, between wanting to honor her mother and wanting to avoid being embarrassed. Both sides of her tugged with equal force. A light breeze brushed past her hair, and she looked up at the sky. It was clear and bright, the kind of sky her mother used to admire when they took evening walks together. Her mother always said the sky made everything feel possible, even when life got difficult. Maybe this was one of those moments her mother meant. She took a slow breath and tried to calm the swirling thoughts in her mind. She knew she couldn't erase the fear completely. She knew she couldn't silence the voices of those who mocked her. But maybe she didn't have to. Maybe she just needed to focus on her reason for playing. She stood up from the bench and brushed off her clothes. She wasn't ready yet, and she didn't feel brave yet, but she was trying, and trying was enough for now. As she walked back toward the school building, she kept her steps steady, reminding herself of the message on the paper she had just read. Her mother's words echoed softly in her mind. Play anyway, even if people laughed, even if they didn't understand, even if her voice shook when she introduced the piece. She would still play, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the moment. That still replayed in her mind, the moment they ridiculed her simple request. She didn't know it yet, but that moment would become the very fire she needed. Their doubt would eventually push her to try harder, practice longer, and pour her entire heart into the performance. The same students who made fun of her had no idea what that simple request meant to her. They didn't know about the long nights she spent practicing alone in her room. They didn't know about the memories tied to every note of the piece. They didn't know how much courage it took for her just to step forward and ask for a chance. But they would learn. One day, they would hear her play, and everything would change. For now, though, she simply walked down the hallway, quiet as always, holding her mother's message close in her mind. She didn't know what would happen at the talent show. She didn't know if things would go the way she hoped. But she did know one thing: she wasn't going to back out. Not this time. Not when the memory of her mother was depending on her. And as she turned the corner, her fingers once again moved gently across her lap, imagining the keys. The melody played in her mind, soft but steady, like a voice calling her forward. She would answer that call. She would play, and she hoped quietly, deeply, that somewhere, somehow, her mother would be proud. Here is part 2, written in simple, natural, human-focused storytelling, approx 1,500 words. In a separate document as you requested. She returned home that afternoon feeling heavier than usual. Her steps were slow as she walked through the small gate and into the quiet house. It was the kind of silence that always felt a little too deep, a little too empty, especially since her mother was no longer there to fill it. She closed the door gently and set her school bag down. For a moment, she stood in the hallway, listening to nothing but the distant hum of a ceiling fan. She had grown used to the silence, but on days when her confidence felt shaken, it wrapped around her like a reminder of everything she had lost. After taking a long breath, she made her way to the living room. The curtains were half open, letting a soft afternoon light spill onto the floor. Dust particles floated in the sunbeam, moving slowly like tiny pieces of time drifting through the room. And against the far wall stood the old upright piano. Its wooden surface had faded corners, and the once bright keys were now slightly yellowed. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't expensive. But it held memories no other object in the world could replace. Memories of her mother sitting beside her, gently guiding her fingers across the keys. Memories of laughter when she played the wrong notes. Memories of warmth and togetherness. She walked toward the piano and rested her hand on the cool wood. For a moment, she simply stood there, letting her fingers trace the lines of the cover. It had been a long time since she had touched it. Too long. She finally lifted the cover slowly. The soft creak it made was familiar. A sound she had heard hundreds of times growing up. Underneath, the keys waited for her, quiet and patient. A thin layer of dust covered some of them. She felt guilty when she saw that. Her mother would never have let it sit untouched for so long. She reached for a cloth and gently wiped the dust away, taking her time with each key. It felt almost like she was apologizing for letting grief steal her music, for stepping away from the one thing that once brought her joy. When she finished cleaning, she sat down on the bench and ran her fingertips lightly across the keys. They felt the same as always, solid, familiar, comforting. She took a deep breath and reached into the piano bench. Inside, she found sheets of music, some old, some torn at the edges. But there, tucked in the middle, was the one she had been looking for, her mother's song. The title wasn't fancy. It wasn't even written properly. It was just handwritten in her mother's neat, slightly slanted style. For my daughter. When she saw it, her eyes softened. She remembered the day her mother wrote it. She remembered how proudly her mother handed it to her, saying it was something special they shared, something only the two of them understood. She placed the sheet on the stand and let her hands hover over the keys. At first, she didn't play. She just breathed. She needed a moment to gather herself. The song wasn't just music to her. It was a doorway to memories she wasn't always ready to face. But today, she needed it. She pressed the first note. A soft, warm tone filled the room. Then another note, and another. The melody was slow at the beginning, gentle like a quiet conversation. She followed the sequence her mother had taught her, letting her fingers remember what her mind sometimes forgot. As she played, the room came alive again. It felt like her mother's presence drifted through the air, settling beside her. She remembered her mother humming softly to the rhythm. She remembered warm afternoons spent practicing together. She didn't play perfectly. She missed a few keys. Some notes came out weaker than she wanted, but she kept going, letting the song carry her. Halfway through, her fingers stumbled and stopped. The sudden silence felt sharp. She swallowed hard. The emotions rising inside her were too strong, too sudden. Playing this song always brought back memories, not just good ones, but memories of the day everything changed. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. She reminded herself that she wasn't playing to be perfect. She wasn't playing for the students who laughed at her. She was playing because this song was the last gift her mother had left her. She tried again. This time her fingers moved more steadily. She focused on the melody, letting it guide her through the difficult parts. The song built slowly, rising into a beautiful mix of hope and sadness. It carried emotion in every note, and she poured her heart into each one. When she finally reached the last chord, she held it for a moment, letting the sound fade naturally into the room. She sat there in silence afterward, the type of silence that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of memories, full of meaning. She touched the keys again, softer this time. The doubts from earlier started to settle quietly in the background. She still felt hurt from the comments at school, but now that she had played her mother's song again, she remembered why she wanted to perform. She wanted to honor her mother. She wanted to share something real. She wanted to be brave. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to compete. She just wanted to play. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't give up, not because of a few rude comments, not because some people didn't understand her. Her mother had faced hardships too, and she never backed down from the things she loved. As she sat on the piano bench, she felt a small spark of determination come back to her. But the path ahead wasn't easy. Practicing the song wasn't the hard part. She knew every note, every pause, every shift in emotion. The real challenge was believing she deserved to be on that stage, believing she belonged there, believing her music mattered. She stood and stretched her fingers. They ached just a little from playing after so long. She smiled softly at the feeling. It had been too long since she felt that familiar ache. She turned on a small lamp near the piano, letting the warm light brighten the room. She sat down again, placed the sheet properly, and decided she would practice for real this time, not just remembering the notes, but preparing herself. She began again from the start. This time she paid attention to the details, the strength of her fingers, the timing, the smoothness between transitions. She wanted the performance to carry emotion, not just sound. The room filled with music over and over again as she repeated difficult sections. Sometimes she missed a note and had to go back. Sometimes she lost the rhythm and paused to fix it. But she kept going, patient with herself. Hours passed without her noticing. By the time she stopped, the sky outside had turned dark. The quiet house was filled with the lingering warmth from the music. She looked at the clock and blinked in surprise. She had been practicing far longer than she realized. She stretched again and stood up, feeling both tired and proud. For the first time in a long while, she felt connected to her music, to her mother, and to the part of herself she thought she had lost. But she also felt something else. Fear. The fear wasn't loud, but it was there. The fear of stepping onto the stage. The fear of messing up in front of everyone. The fear of hearing more laughter. She wrapped her arms around herself and took a slow breath. "Can I really do this?" she whispered to the quiet room. The piano didn't answer, but she remembered her mother's message again. Don't be afraid to share your gift. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she wasn't ready. But her mother believed she could do it. And maybe that belief was enough to carry her forward. She turned off the lamp and slowly walked to her room. Carrying the sheet of music with her, she placed it carefully on her bedside table, as if it were something precious, and to her, it truly was. That night, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about the upcoming talent show. She imagined walking onto the stage. She imagined the crowd. She imagined the sound of her mother's song filling the auditorium. She also imagined the students who mocked her, their faces, their whispers. Her heart tightened at the thought, but she tried to push it away. This wasn't about them. This was about her. This was about her mother. This was about finding strength in the one thing that had always given her comfort. Before she finally drifted to sleep, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would practice every day. She would give everything she had. She would honor the memory of the person who believed in her the most. And when the night of the show came, she would walk onto that stage no matter how much her hands shook, no matter what anyone thought. She would play for her mother, for herself, and she hoped, deep down, that by the end of her performance, she would feel her mother's pride wrapping around her like a warm embrace once again. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. The sun had only begun to rise, and the air outside her window still felt cool and soft. For a moment, she stayed in bed and listened to the quiet. She didn't feel fully rested, but she felt a strange kind of energy inside her, something between nervousness and determination. When she finally stood and got ready for school, she kept glancing at the sheet of music on her bedside table. It felt like it was silently encouraging her. She touched it lightly before leaving the house, almost like a small promise to herself. School, however, was not as comforting. As soon as she walked into the hallway, she heard whispers. People weren't whispering about her directly this time, but she could tell the news of the talent show had spread. Groups of students stood near lockers, talking excitedly about their plans, dance routines, funny skits, songs they wanted to sing. The atmosphere buzzed with confidence. She didn't feel confident. Not yet. She walked through the hallway quietly, hoping to slip past without anyone noticing her. But a few students did. "Hey, did you hear? She's doing a piano thing," someone said. "Really? Why?" Another replied, "Who knows? Maybe she wants attention." She kept walking, pretending not to hear, but each comment tugged at her like a tiny pull on her heart. She wished people understood that she didn't want attention at all. If anything, she wished she could perform without anyone looking at her. Still, she kept moving forward. During the first class, she found it hard to focus. The teacher wrote notes on the board, but her mind drifted repeatedly to the piano at home. She imagined the way her fingers fit the keys, the soft weight of each note, the warmth of her mother's melody. The memory helped ease her nerves a little, but during the break, the rumors intensified. She stood by the water fountain when a group of students walked by. One of them said loudly, "I heard she's playing some sad song. This is supposed to be a fun show." Another added, "Yeah, no one wants to cry at a talent show." Someone else laughed, "Maybe she's trying to get sympathy points." Her chest tightened. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She wasn't trying to win anything. She just wanted to play. She took a slow breath and tried to calm her mind. She knew she couldn't let their words get to her, but it was hard. Words had a way of digging into the soft parts of her heart. Later, as she waited for her next class, her friend approached her. He wasn't loud or overly cheerful. He was gentle, someone who always noticed when she was struggling. He stood beside her and said softly, "You okay?" She nodded, even though she wasn't. He didn't push. He just waited quietly, giving her space to speak. After a moment, she said, "People keep talking. I didn't think it would bother me this much." He looked at her with understanding. "People talk about everything. It doesn't mean they know what they're talking about." She managed a small smile. "It's still hard, I know," he said, "but you're brave for doing this." She didn't feel brave, but it meant a lot to hear those words. No one else had said anything kind about her performance, not yet. His encouragement felt like a small light in a dark hallway after school. She went home with a clear plan. She would practice again. She would not let doubt win. Once she dropped her bag by the door, she went straight to the living room. The piano waited patiently for her. She sat down, placed the music sheet in front of her, and took a slow breath. Then she played. She played with more emotion than she had the day before. Each note felt like it carried a piece of her heart. She played through the parts that were difficult, stopping only when she needed to fix a small mistake. She repeated sections again and again, building strength in her fingers and confidence in her timing. But even with all her effort, doubt slipped into her thoughts. What if they laugh? What if my hands shake too much? What if I freeze on stage? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they kept returning. At one point, she stopped playing completely and rested her hands in her lap. The room felt quiet again, and her chest felt tight. She stared at the piano keys, thinking about all the times her mother told her she had a gift. Her mother never doubted her, not once. Even when she was little and could barely reach the keys, her mother encouraged her. You just have to trust yourself, her mother used to say, and trust the music. She repeated those words softly, almost as if her mother were still beside her. Then she tried again. Over the next few days, this became her routine: school, practice, rest, repeat. Every day she felt a mixture of fear and determination. Some days she felt strong, ready to face whatever came her way. Other days she felt fragile, uncertain if she was doing the right thing. Rumors continued at school. Some students said she would ruin the show. Others thought she would be too nervous to perform well. A few even joked about pretending to fall asleep during her performance. She tried not to listen, but the comments found their way to her anyway. She wasn't angry at them. She was just hurt. Her friend stayed by her side, offering quiet encouragement whenever she needed it. Sometimes he would ask, "Do you want to talk about it?" Other times he simply walked with her so she wouldn't feel alone. His presence helped more than he realized. As the talent show drew closer, the school buzzed with excitement. Students practiced during lunch breaks. Some rehearsed dance moves in the courtyard. Others sang loudly in empty classrooms. Everywhere she went, she felt the pressure building. One afternoon, she overheard two students talking outside the cafeteria. "I can't wait for the show. The dance group is supposed to be amazing." "Yeah, and the comedy skit will be funny too. But that piano girl? I don't know what she's thinking." She paused mid-step, listening even though she wished she didn't. "She's too quiet. How is someone like her supposed to entertain anyone?" "Exactly. It's a talent show, not a sad movie." She walked away before they could say anything else. Her throat felt tight, and she blinked rapidly to keep tears from forming. She didn't want anyone to see her upset. When she got home that day, she sat at the piano but didn't play immediately. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. She reminded herself why she started all this. She reminded herself that this wasn't about making people cheer. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about her mother. Thinking of her mother brought both comfort and pain. Comfort because she still felt connected through the music. Pain because she missed her so much. She finally placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers were shaky at first, but once she played the opening notes, the fear softened. The melody steadied her. By the time she reached the middle of the song, she felt calm again. She kept practicing until her fingers were tired, and only then did she stop. As she closed the piano for the night, she realized something important. She didn't need the approval of the students at school. She didn't need loud applause or excited cheers. If even one person in the audience listened, truly listened, then that was enough, because the song held meaning, and meaning didn't need an audience to exist. Still, performing in front of people was not easy for her. She was quiet, sensitive, and shy. The idea of standing under bright lights made her heart race. She knew she would feel nervous no matter how much she practiced. But courage wasn't about not feeling afraid. Courage was doing something even when your hands shook. And she was learning slowly, painfully, that she had more courage than she ever realized. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed her day in her mind. The doubts, the comments, the moments when she felt unsure. But she also remembered the times she pushed forward anyway. The moments she played through her fear. The encouragement from her friend. She realized she was growing, little by little. The next day at school, her friend met her near the entrance. He smiled at her and asked, "Ready for another day?" She gave a small smile back. "I think so. Don't forget," he said gently. "You're doing something beautiful. People might not see it yet, but they will." His words stayed with her all day. They became a small voice in her mind, one that reminded her she wasn't completely alone. By the end of the week, she felt different. The fear was still there, but it didn't control her. The doubt remained, but it didn't silence her. She was becoming stronger. Her music felt louder. Her heart felt steadier. And although she didn't fully believe in herself yet, she was moving closer to that belief. She didn't know what the night of the talent show would bring. She didn't know if people would understand or if they would still judge her. But she knew one thing for sure. She would walk onto that stage. She would sit at the piano. She would play her mother's song. And no matter what happened, she would give it her whole heart, because some things are worth facing fear for. And sharing a piece of her mother was one of them. The days that followed felt heavier than usual for her. She carried the weight of that moment at the piano room doorway. The way the group had laughed. The way the instructor had hesitated. And the way she had quietly stepped aside. She kept replaying it in her mind, wondering if she had made the right choice by walking away instead of insisting. But she reminded herself that forcing her way in wasn't her style. She wanted to earn respect, not beg for it. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had let her mother down. Her mother was the one who had first placed her tiny hands on the smooth keys of a small toy piano. When she was just a child, she would always say, "Music listens to the heart before the hands." Those words had stayed with her, even after her mother was gone. That evening, after returning home, she sat by the small keyboard in her room. It wasn't fancy and it didn't sound perfect, but it still worked. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. She didn't try to play anything complicated. Instead, she played the simple melody her mother used to hum while cooking, a tune she hadn't played in years. The sound was soft, uneven at first, as if her feelings were getting in the way. But as she continued, the tune steadied, and the room filled with the gentle music she had grown up with. Her father paused outside her door, listening. He gently knocked and stepped inside with a small smile. "You're practicing again," he said softly. She nodded but didn't stop playing until she reached the end of the melody. Then she exhaled slowly. "I just wanted to feel close to her again," she whispered. Her father walked over and sat beside her. He didn't speak for a long moment. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a light, reassuring squeeze. "She'd be proud of you," he finally said. "Not because you want to prove something to anyone, but because you still carry her love for music." His voice was warm, steady, and exactly what she needed to hear. She leaned her head against his arm for a moment. "I want to play again," she said quietly. "Really play. But every time I try, I feel like someone is ready to laugh again." Her father let out a slow breath. "People who laugh at others usually have nothing meaningful to offer," he said. "You're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself and for her." She knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. She still felt a knot in her chest when she thought about going back to the club room. The next day at school, she kept her head down, trying not to draw attention. She didn't want to run into the group again, especially the boy who had mocked her the loudest. But life doesn't always listen to what we want. As she walked past the music hall during lunch, she heard the faint sound of piano keys from inside. The melody was fast, lively, and full of confidence. It was the same boy from before, practicing a complex piece he always bragged about. She paused without meaning to, partly out of curiosity, partly because she wanted to understand what made him so sure of himself. After a moment, she turned to leave, but someone called out, "Hey, you're the girl from the other day, right?" Her heart sank. She didn't want to talk to anyone from that group. A quiet voice continued, "Wait, I just wanted to say, sorry about what happened." She turned slowly. It wasn't the boy who had mocked her. It was another student from the club, a girl who had stayed quiet during the entire incident. "I should have said something," the girl admitted. "I didn't agree with the way they acted. It wasn't right." Her chest loosened slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something she didn't expect. "You don't need to apologize," she said. "I shouldn't have asked at a busy time." "No," the girl insisted, stepping closer. "We shouldn't have laughed. That was wrong." They stood in silence for a few seconds. Then the girl added, "For what it's worth, if you ever want to practice in the room when it's free, I can help you with the keys or Timmings. I'm not great, but I can at least make sure no one bothers you." She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to someone stepping out of their comfort zone to speak up for her. "Thank you," she finally replied. The girl gave her a small nod and returned to the piano room. She walked away slowly, surprised at how that small exchange had eased some of her nerves. Maybe not everyone in the club was the same. That night after dinner, She pulled out an old notebook from under her bed. The pages were yellowed, filled with music lines, scribbles, and short notes written in her mother's handwriting. Some pages were stained from time, but the words were clear. Never play to impress. Play to express. She touched the handwriting gently. It felt like her mother was still guiding her. She spent the next hour writing down small practice goals for herself. Simple things, nothing complicated. Practice left hand timing. Slow down on shifting chords. Try the new melody without stopping halfway. Don't be afraid. She didn't expect to feel comforted, but she did. Over the next few days, she made a habit of practicing quietly at home. Sometimes her father listened from his room. Sometimes he sat in the living room pretending to read, though she knew he was listening to her progress. One evening, while she was practicing a simple but emotional piece, her father walked in again. "You're improving," he said with a soft smile. She stopped playing and breathed out. "I want to try playing in the music room again," she said. "Not when the club is there, just when it's empty." Her father nodded as if he had been waiting for her to say that. "Then do it," he replied. "You deserve the space as much as anyone else." The next day during lunch, she went to the hallway again. She peeked inside the piano room. To her relief, it was empty. Sunlight from the high windows made the room look cleaner, brighter, even peaceful. Her steps were slow at first. She looked around to make sure no one was hiding or waiting to laugh. When she was certain, she closed the door gently and approached the piano. It wasn't dusty like the old one she had found weeks ago. This one was well maintained, polished, and warm under the lights. She sat down, placed her feet flat on the ground, and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. They felt different, smoother, firmer, more alive. She took a quiet breath. Then she began to play. Not the complex melody from the club members, not the showy pieces people often use to impress. She played the tune her mother used to hum. The sound filled the room, soft at first, then fuller, clearer, as though the piano remembered the kind of music that came from the heart, not the ego. With every note, she felt a tug of emotion, not sadness, but warmth, connection, something deep and steady. She kept her eyes closed because she didn't want the world to interrupt this moment. What she didn't know was that someone was listening. The same girl from the club had walked past the room and stopped when she heard the melody. She didn't open the door. She didn't interrupt. She just listened with wide eyes, stunned that the quiet girl she thought was shy or unsure could produce music that felt so honest. When the last note faded, the girl hesitated, then finally opened the door. She turned around, startled. "That was beautiful," the girl said softly. She didn't know how to respond. Her hands trembled slightly on her lap. "I didn't mean to intrude," the girl continued, "but you should join the club, not because you need to prove anything, but because you have something real to offer." The words landed gently but firmly. She looked down at the keys. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear this time, but from the possibility of something new. Maybe she wasn't ready, but maybe she would be soon, and maybe her mother really would be proud of her. The next morning felt different for her. It wasn't that anything around her had changed, but something inside her felt a little stronger, a little braver. She woke up with the memory of the melody she played in the empty music room, still echoing softly in her ears. Her mother's tune. Her tune now. She got ready for school slowly, thinking about everything that had happened, the laughter, the apology, the small moment of courage she had found the day before. Every piece of it felt like part of a path she didn't know she was walking until now. When she arrived at school, she didn't rush to class like she usually did. She walked with a calm pace, noticing the small things she had ignored before. The early sunlight across the courtyard, the chatter of students, the smell of chalk from opened classroom doors. For once, none of it made her shrink back. She wasn't sure if she would visit the music room again that day, but the thought stayed with her, not as a fear this time, but as a possibility. During lunch, she was sitting alone outside when the same girl from the club approached her. The girl hesitated for a moment before taking a seat beside her. "I hope it's okay if I sit here," the girl said quietly. She nodded. "It's fine." The girl looked down at her hands and then back up. "I keep thinking about the way you played yesterday. I wasn't expecting it. It felt honest. You don't see that a lot." She didn't know how to respond to a compliment like that, so she stayed quiet. After a moment, the girl continued, "Look, I know joining the club might feel uncomfortable after everything that happened. I get it, but we're not all like that. Some of us really want new people to join, and you could bring something different." The idea of joining still scared her. Even after hearing such kind words. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. That's okay. The girl replied. You don't have to decide right now, just don't stop playing. The girl stood up and gave her a small smile before leaving. She stayed seated, thinking about those words. Don't stop playing. It felt like her mother was speaking through someone else. After school ended, she walked home with a thoughtful expression. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something important, but she didn't know whether to take the step forward or step back. When she got home, her father was in the living room fixing something on the table. He looked up and noticed her expression. Long day? He asked. She shrugged. Just a lot to think about. He waited quietly, giving her space to speak if she wanted to. She walked over and sat beside him. Someone from the club talked to me again today, she said. Good or bad? He asked. Good, she said. She said I should keep playing. Her father smiled gently. She's right. She looked down at her hands. But what if? What if I'm not good enough? What if I freeze in front of people? What if they laugh again? Her father put down the tool he was holding. You'll never know unless you give yourself a chance, he said. And even if you do freeze, even if someone laughs, what does that change? Does it take away what music means to you? She shook her head. No, he said softly. It doesn't. Later that evening, she went to her room and sat at her small keyboard again. Her fingers were slow at first, but as she played, she felt the notes guiding her thoughts. She thought about her mother, about the dusty piano she had found at the start, about the moment she heard the music room students laugh that day. She thought about how those moments hurt her, but also shaped her. When she finished playing, she sat quietly for a long time. Then she made a decision. The next day during lunch, she stood in front of the music room door again. Her heart beat fast, but she steadied her breath. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She wasn't there to compete or prove something. She was there because she wanted to take a step she had avoided for too long. Inside, the club members were practicing the same lively piece as before. Their instructor saw her first and raised an eyebrow in surprise. She stepped inside slowly. Can I talk to you for a moment? She asked the instructor. He nodded and walked over to her. The room quieted a little as people noticed her. I want to join the club, she said. Her voice shook slightly, but her eyes didn't. The instructor studied her for a moment, not unkindly. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, he nodded. Then welcome. We're always happy to have someone who's dedicated. Some of the club members exchanged looks, some surprised, some neutral, some unsure. The boy who had laughed at her before looked slightly uncomfortable, but she didn't look at him for long. The girl who had supported her gave her a warm smile. She joined them in the room, standing near the back at first. She didn't rush to the piano. She didn't need to. She just listened to everyone playing. She watched their hands move, their expressions shift with the rhythm, the way the instructor guided them. After a few minutes, the instructor turned to her. Would you like to play something? He asked gently. She felt dozens of eyes turn to her. Her heart jumped, but she took a slow breath. Yes, she said. She walked toward the piano. Each step felt like a small victory. She sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she played. The same melody she played alone. The same gentle tune her mother had hummed years ago. But this time, it sounded fuller, steadier, richer. Not because the piano was better, but because she wasn't holding back. When she opened her eyes at the end, the room was quiet, not a single laugh, just silence. Then the instructor spoke softly. That, he said, is music that comes from the heart. A few students nodded quietly. The girl smiled proudly. Even the boy who once mocked her looked down, as if realizing something he hadn't understood before. She didn't feel like she had won anything. She didn't feel like she had beaten anyone. She just felt whole. That afternoon, as she walked out of the music room, she felt lighter. Not because everything was perfect now, but because she had done something she never thought she'd have the courage to do. When she got home, her father looked up from the kitchen table. How did it go? He asked. She smiled softly. I joined, she said. He didn't respond with words right away. He walked over and hugged her gently. I'm proud of you, he said. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling warmth spread through her chest. That night, as she prepared for bed, she opened the old notebook filled with her mother's notes. She traced her fingers over the familiar handwriting, her mother's words, still guiding her. Never play to impress, play to express. She smiled. She had finally understood, and somewhere deep inside, she felt certain her mother would have been proud not just of her music, but of the quiet strength she found within herself. And this time, that thought didn't make her feel sad. It made her feel brave.